Good evening, everybody. Welcome once again to Captive Audience with your hosts, Don Anderson and the gracious Sunny Danforth. Say hello, Sunny.
Well, hello, yes, and register to vote. We've got
Register.
up until the 15th for Oregon. I've got a hair here. You've got to register to vote. Check your voter
Yeah,
registration.
absolutely. Welcome to the home stretch. It's the fourth quarter. It's the beginning of overtime. We may have to go to double overtime. What hyperboles can we bring to the table to express how important this one is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We are in the sprint stretch, absolutely. And, I'll tell you what's nice. I had a fellow give me a call today and said, Sonny, we need to get over to this community and that community. I want to get a list and talk to people about registering to vote. And I go, I love it. Okay, I'll help you. I'll help you get there. And he's a good conservative, good Republican, but he's not a part of like our, central committee. But he knows how important it is. And that's what it takes. We all have to do everything we can for this election
And absolutely,
to
whatever's
get
within your
people to
wheelhouse
turn.
to do. I mean, there's some people who have the physical capacity and the talent and the energy to go out there and knock on doors or talk to people at the supermarket, that sort of thing. There's others who do a great job of just voting with their feet, changing their shopping patterns to only do business with organizations that support the Constitution. Then there's some of us who, maybe the most important thing you can do is talk to that neighbor, that person who makes a comment, and rather than just rolling over and letting it go, you find it within yourself to say, this is important enough that it's worth it for me, because this is going to be a person to person, belly to belly thing. And the only way we're going to win this is if everybody engages in the fight. So, with that said, why don't we launch into some of these good and interesting things we always have every week, Sonny? And I think a great place to start is what are the policy comparisons between these two candidates? What are the reasons why, if you're talking to that neighbor over the fence, why they should vote for Trump? I mean, the objective reasons why they should vote for Trump over over Harris. And so, with that in mind, we just talk about this article that Sonny was so gracious to send to me that shows a policy comparison. And I just like to start with a couple of points, then Sonny, you hop in.
Sure.
Some of the things like I find that are immediately helpful to citizens the minute it's enacted. It doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure it out. No tax on tips. We've heard Trump speak to that. No tax on Social Security payments. I've always been amazed that Social Security payments were taxed. I mean, why would you tax that? People already got taxed to get it, right? Uh,
Yes.
Giant increase in child tax credits. I mean, these are like what do you call it? No end on overtime pay. That's not why are we doing that? We want to incentivize people to do that. Can you imagine what a boom that would be to people, especially in light of the inflation tax that Biden's been imposing on us for the last 3 years?
Mhm.
So, Sonny, what are your thoughts? What additions do you have to that?
Well, I'll tell you, in the taxes, we do have taxes upon taxes upon taxes. And one of the ways that you inspur growth is by cutting taxes and giving people money back in their pocket, and that's how you can spur the economy on by doing that. But I'll tell you this article, which I reposted it in the comments there in the Epic Times. It is so good because it goes through the comparisons of the economy and taxes and governance, and everybody could study this and use it as a talking points to family, friends, and neighbors. Healthcare and education. And the first thing and the most simplest thing that we have to do that is so on, I think the number one deal is our economy, of course, but is closing our border. And Trump has already done it once. It's going to be very easy to do again. And I thought that JD Vance last night, in the debate, articulated really well about the border and how to handle exporting those illegals that are in our country, because they kind of tried to do a gotcha with him,
Mhm.
on that. How's Trump says he's going to do mass deportation, and JD Vance very well articulated that. Well, first we have to stop the bleed. You have to close the border down.
Mhm.
Then anybody that has criminal charges, wham, that's easy. We can get rid of those people super easy.
Mhm.
And because they were the moderators, in my viewpoint, was trying to get him to, excuse me, say, he says, what about separation? How are you going to separate the families?
Mhm.
And well, first you've got to actually find out if they are families, because
Mhm.
when we had a closed border,
Mhm.
when the kids were coming through, they were doing DNA testing on them to make sure they were traveling with
Mhm.
somebody, a family member, which I
Sure.
think they've not been a lot lately.
Oh, I don't think they've done that at all. Well, of course, the whole strategy on the Democratic side is to get them here, and then they can make emotional arguments like that to allow them to
Yes.
stay. And of course, there's going to be some difficult cases that arise because of that. However, at the end of the day, you have to be a country of laws, and you can't run anything without rules that are followed. And in this case, I think one of the things that we could all do a better job pointing out as conservatives is that this is a massive the illegal immigration represents a massive tax on the citizens of this country,
Oh, yeah.
but it's not an equally distributed tax. It's a tax that falls more heavily on the poorest among us because whose neighborhoods are they going to move into? They're going to move into the neighborhoods of the poorest among us. The poor whites, the poor blacks, and the poor Hispanics are going to be the ones who pay the biggest tax on that. And the tax they're going to pay is going to be in the form of their public school systems being diminished because now more time is going to be spent learning and teaching in foreign languages. The welfare access that's going to be stressed. The housing access is going to be stretched. The cost of rental housing and housing in general will go up because it's the basic supply and demand. You got too few goods being chased by too many people is going to drive up the cost. The crime always falls more on them than anyone else.
Yeah.
So they're going to take the hit first. And this is classic what the left does. They always hurt the poor and then run around saying they're in favor of the poor.
You're right. And Comrade Kamala has talked specifically about the equity, making it equitable for those that are in this country, and actually uh, wanting to use, well, those that are migrants are ahead of anybody else, the citizens of this country. And that's not it. It's merit based. We need merit based immigration. And if you qualify for a loan, you know what, you can buy a house. But
Sure.
everything is going up, everything. um and so that's, for me, that's the number one. And I think a lot of people is because they're seeing it in their communities. They're being affected by it. It is in the news, thank goodness,
Mhm.
about immigration and what is happening. And that's a big deal. It's also affecting healthcare. It's
Sure.
affecting the schools
Yeah.
and and
Ev-
jobs. I
Yeah.
mean, it's hugely affecting everything in America.
Yeah, every system's stressed by it. And the thing is they can no longer hide it. It's no longer just the people talking about it and talking theory. It's in their houses, it's in their neighborhoods, it's in their school systems, it's in their parks. And when you hear about cases like Springfield, Ohio, that was just the one that got the most news recently. But that's
Mhm.
happening in multiple communities across the country. You look at what's happened in Aurora, Colorado, where we now have what is it, Venezuelan gang members taking over apartment complexes. It's happening in Chicago. Well, now the native gang members are talking about how they're going to go to war against the new gang members. Like we need that. You look
We
at
don't need gang on gang
we don't,
violence. We already
we
have
don't, but it looks like we're going to get some more thanks to the Biden and Harris administration. Then you look at New York City, where our government is paying people to stay in luxury apartments and hotels and paying for their food and gas. Meanwhile, we got homeless veterans in the street. It's unbelievable what the left has done. I hate to call them radical because it's like all the left now. The whole
that.
party seems to have just
Yeah,
gone off the deep end. Um,
it has. And I watched a video today of a fellow that went to a hotel. He went to I don't know, he was a platinum Holiday Inn or whatever the brand of the hotel was.
mhm,
It wasn't like a Hyatt Regency, okay?
mhm,
And so he went to the hotel. He's a platinum level person, whatever that is, in his, that guy, I belong to some hotel
Mhm.
groups myself.
Yeah, I was
But
platinum once upon a time, so yeah.
yeah, you've been there,
Mhm.
you have a bunch of
Mhm.
points with him. You've stayed
Right.
there a lot. So he
Mhm.
goes with his crew to a couple, three people to try to get rooms. And they say, no, this is under construction. No, we don't have any rooms. You can't come in here. And in the video, it was so telling. The video went on for about 7 minutes, and then it would show some other clips. And at one point, one of the security people said, you're not with the federal agency. And then he goes, what? Is this a federal takeover of this hotel? You just told me that it was under construction. And then here comes some migrants walk in, right? They go in, they don't get asked anything, but
Mhm.
interestingly, they had to walk through one of those magnetic things to detect arms. And so he films through the window. He goes, oh, well, isn't that interesting? They
Mhm.
have to even the children are getting wanded. Why would you wand children? And he went on and on and on. Well, today with, so where's this money coming from?
Mhm.
Well,
Well,
today it's been talked about because of Hurricane Helene, and the damage. Well, Kamala Harris, Comrade Kamala, says we're going to give all the citizens affected by Hurricane Helene $750. This is what they've said they will give to those in Hawaii. At when through the fire damage, we'll give everybody $750. And so it's been reported today that it's almost $1 billion of FEMA money has gone to house these illegals. Is that in America, or was that the housing and their transport and their phones and their money cards, their welfare cards, as they come up from South America? And because they cross the Darien Gap, they've got these huge tent cities down there. Is that where the FEMA money went?
well,
So
it sure
FEMA has spent almost $1 billion on illegals, and
and
it's
it's sure.
saying giving the American citizens a big middle finger.
Well, I tell you, $750 just doesn't sound like very much, particularly when you think about how many millions they're spending to house illegals in New York City in five-star hotels. It's in Chicago, same thing in Chicago. It's just unbelievable, what they're doing. Um,
It
and-
is, and all I can say is it's waking more Americans up.
Mhm.
If
That
they
is,
are, if they will open their eyes, look
mhm,
at some alternative news,
mhm.
it is waking more people up to the disparity of what us taxpayer citizens, that the government doesn't care about us.
Oh, and in the meantime, how many billions have we spent going to Ukraine,
Oh
of
yeah,
all places,
yeah.
paying for weapons to kill other people's citizens? It's it's unreal, but we can't find it within ourselves as a leadership class to fly down to the southeast to go at least visit the site where these disasters have occurred. And I understand, talking to you earlier, they finally made their way down there. I don't think they went to Ohio at all when they had that train accident, for example.
I think it was 1 year later that Biden finally went where the train went in Palestine. And, but here in going back to this Epic Times comparison of Trump and Harris, Harris says that the immigration system is broken and suggests reforms, including earned pathways to citizenship. She's lying. She's the border czar. She's
Yeah,
flat lying.
the earned pathway is applying legally and coming into the country legally. That's the earned pathway.
Exactly. Exactly. She's granted a permanent, temporary protected status to the Haitians, that are here.
Mhm,
And she says she wants to grant conditional permanent resident status to the Afghans who fled
mhm.
to the US following the withdrawal. Well, the Afghans that helped us while we were there, that's one thing. But I watched a new video yesterday, and it was Afghans, Syrians coming across the border, single
Mhm.
military fighting aged men coming walking across in line, and the reporter just went down and asked them what country, and they're going China, China, Egypt, a whole bunch from Egypt.
Yeah.
Then it was Syria, and then it was um
Well, this is the thing. When they had a chance, when that administration had a chance to help those Afghanis, what did they do? They didn't do a thing.
no.
That was one of the most heart-wrenching things you've ever seen, was people
Yes.
hanging off airplanes as they took off, and they're hanging off the wings and fall off the wings. Talk about one of the most visual signs of complete and utter incompetence that I've ever seen.
Yes.
It makes the airlift out of Saigon look like child's play, and not to mention all the weapons that they left behind that are no doubt being used against Israel right now. This administration has been a playbook on disaster. Um, I don't know how else to describe it.
Yeah, absolutely. And then versus Trump, he wants to put back in place the remain in Mexico and travel ban policies.
Mhm.
And that's what we have to do. We do have to stop the invasion 100%. This is not, peaceful migration. This is an invasion. That's plain and simple.
Yep.
And it's amazing that they have been so blatantly doing this. They don't care. And now I don't know if you follow James O'Keefe, but there is a movie coming out, Line in the Sand,
Mhm.
and whistleblowers, Border Patrol whistleblowers, are talking about, what they've had to do. And it is, I've only seen one small little clip, and I think it's going to be very much worth watching. And these is like this one fellow, he's a 19-year veteran. He said, screw the pension. I have to have a conscience. And
Mhm.
what is happening, is horrendous
Mhm.
at our border, and what they're witnessing and being told stand down.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the country is amazingly resilient. I continue to be amazed at how much punishment it can take from its own government and still be functioning the way that it is, but nothing's too big to fail. And you have to think to yourself, could we stand another 4 years of this? I mean, it hasn't hit every community yet, but you think about the homeless situations in places like Portland, where there are many neighborhoods where people are like just right in your front yard, you know.
Yeah.
And you've seen the video, people going to the bathroom, doing drugs, needles all over the place. Now layer on massive illegal immigration on top of that, like you see in Springfield, Ohio. It's a recipe for civil disorder and destruction, which I don't see how else you can conclude other than that's their intention. There's no way you could think that that's solving anybody's problem. If we really wanted to help these people, we'd help them in their own countries. I mean, the only people who should be immigrating would be those that have applied legally or ones who have legit political asylum.
Yeah.
But that's not what the current administration is about. It just isn't.
It isn't. And that's part of what we have to remember, is there is a good portion of citizens in the United States that truly are listening to MSDNC and don't really have a clue as to the truth of what has happened at the border, and economically, they're not seeing it. They've been gaslit. What they are seeing is inflation, though. They're
Yeah.
seeing the cost of everything at the grocery store and at gas and insurance. I mean, everything has gone up exponentially.
Oh, it's undeniable, and that's one of the reasons why I would even suggest that even the ones who are gaslit by this media and only thing they see is this big media,
Mhm.
but they're seeing it on their in their own lives. You can no longer lie about it. Just like you can play with your statistics all you want, but I know my grocery bill is 30% higher. There's no getting around it. I know the insurance is higher. I know the gas is higher. I know the food is higher. Right? You can't lie about that. And the same thing is true with this illegal immigration, because now in certain of these cities, if you're in Chicago, you see the result of it. They're in your neighborhoods, they're in your parks, they're in your schools. The crime that they're committing is through the roof. The same thing is true of New York City. Pretty much all the big cities that have had this massive immigration. You look at Colorado, even in the places liberal as Colorado. Look at what's happened to Aurora. At some point, you're going to have to change the way you've been voting, and we see that happening. The Democrats have been losing the minority vote at a rate that they've never lost it before. I think the Hispanic vote's almost 50% now, where once upon a time that was like 70%. The black vote I saw was like 26% Republican now, where I think the most anyone's ever gotten was Bush, and it was like 8 or 9%. I think Trump like 1 or 2% the last time around. So it's and it's probably higher than that, because I don't know about you, I'm just not believing these polls. You think about the national media, like in CNN, MSNBC. What percentage of the population is watching that? I mean, so their viewership has plummeted, and I'm sure you've seen these man on the streets that they do. I saw
Oh,
one.
yes.
It was a CNN reporter, and I can't remember what city she was in. She could only find one person who was voting for Harris.
Yeah.
One. So
Yeah, it is the polling. I don't know. They keep every day you get the results of several polls, and but when you go to, like you're saying, the man on the street, it's not adding up.
no,
It's not adding up, and like here's new Trump in New York pops into a bodega. He doesn't set this up ahead of time. He, of course, they have to because of Secret Service to a
right.
degree. But
Mhm.
the people coming out, they're going, "Oh no, don't show that." The people
Right.
are coming out going, "Oh yeah, Trump, we love you."
Well, did you
Here's
catch?
the iron
Mhm.
workers, and a lot of the
Yeah.
union guys over there like him. He's a
Oh,
developer, he's a builder, he's a
mhm.
jobs maker.
Well, did you catch the Alabama Georgia game? Did you see the
Oh
reception there?
yes,
Like
yes,
unbelievable. I mean,
yeah.
when Harris and the Minnesota guy, I can't even think of his name now.
Walls,
Well,
walls.
they go places, it's crickets. There have been several occasions where they've been all four together in the same place, and the crowd is shouting Trump. So I just, you know,
Yeah, it's interesting, and we're getting closer to this election now. And with this strike, the dock workers strike, longshoremen, this is not going to make things any better. It's going to get worse.
yeah, no, it's not.
And I'll tell you, Biden is I watched the video from the head of that union, and I felt like he has a disdain for America. And now it's come out today. He makes, nearly $1 million a year. And
Mhm,
I don't begrudge somebody making a lot of money, but his video was kind of said, "Screw you, America.
mhm,
We're going to bring this country down. We want, what they're asking for is 75% wage increases. And yet the minimum they make is like $147 a thousand a year. 147,000 a year, and benefits with that
mhm,
of about 30%. And I do not begrudge people making money. And I could see that they would not want automation,
mhm,
but the way he said what he delivered was
mhm,
awful. Because, oh yeah, even if they force us to go back to work, do you think we're going to?
mhm.
When we can do like 27 containers an hour, maybe we'll do 3 instead. It is it was awful to see a person, given what the hurricane and the damage that is happening, that happened and is happening, and a recovery, knowing that there are goods and ships out there, and this person and the union could give a shit about America.
And see, this is the thing. It goes back to what we talked about in previous, podcasts about the lack of morality in the leadership class. The leadership class is occupied by people who don't share the same value systems as the rest of us. Now, whether you're talking the leadership class in terms of corporation, big data, big pharma, the political class, certainly, these are the ones who are hanging out with the P. Diddy crowd, and this is the life they live. They just don't care. And if we're ever going to have a shot at recovering the country, these people all have to be replaced. So not just the politicians that have no morality, but people who are in leadership positions such as these. Um, and hopefully we'll see that happen. Because for every action there's a reaction, and someone who's behaving like that, there's always that comes back to bite you.
Well, it does. And even the longshoremen that are striking, all of them will be affected by the very same thing we are.
Hmm.
All of us as a country will be affected by this.
Hmm.
And, you can, I don't know about a 75% pay increase. I don't know what time frame that is.
Hmm.
Is that in 5 years? Is that in 10 years? But that's a huge pay increase. And what that does, it's an imbalance of
Hmm.
wage versus cost of goods, because all of that costs the cost of goods going up, the cost of shipping and the cost of goods. Now, when it's made in America here, while you might not have longshoremen,
Hmm.
you still have goods getting, excuse the phone,
Sure, that's
goods
good.
getting moved
Hmm.
throughout our own nation.
Hmm.
The what you can manufacture a lot here in the United States, but the
Hmm.
components have to still come from a lot of other places. It is not going to be a miraculously in 2 years, 4 years. Oh yeah, this is 100% made in America.
Hmm. Yeah.
Not going to happen.
And the thing is, it may be a negotiating ploy. I mean, the timing of that is absolutely awful.
Yes.
It makes you think about the athlete who complains that the 14 million, they can't live on 14 million when the rest of the country is living on a whole lot less than that. So the optics of that are absolutely atrocious. Having said that, the average longshoreman may not feel like that at all. It's the leadership of the union that they're a part of. Um, so there's
And
that.
also, most people, not just Americans, live way beyond their means. They're
Hmm.
hawked to the hilt,
Hmm.
and they're living beyond their means. And or where they're living, rent is really high. They might not own a home, but rent is really, really high, and it's going up everywhere. And it's this vicious cycle of bringing in the illegals,
Hmm.
and then you have housing shortages, and the federal government's paying the rent. We're going to jack it up.
And
you
all
know
that,
they're
yeah, and all that drives the most insidious tax of all, which we call inflation.
Yes.
And that's the cycle that we're in. So until we replace this spending mad, illegal immigration mad administration, we're not going to be able to slow that train.
Yeah. So what did you think of the debate?
Yeah, so I thought, on balance, and I hate to call it winners because too many times the pundits are calling winners and losers when they're not even the ones who are judging this. The people who are judging this are literally the independent voters. So until you poll them to see what they think, you have no idea who won. Now, having said that, just from looking at the pieces of the debate that I'd seen, the person who was the most articulate, the person who spoke to the policies the best, the person who answers the questions the best was clearly Vance. I mean, no doubt about it. I think from a body language perspective, from an answering the questions perspective, his adversary was like probably not as bad as Kamala, but pretty weak, I thought. Um,
I thought he was weak, especially when they asked him about his lie of being at Tiananmen Square.
oh,
I mean, they asked him directly. He
mhm,
would not answer the question. So
mhm,
she asked him again.
mhm.
And he still, what he tells himself, well, sometimes I'm a buffoon. It's like, oh my
Well,
gosh, you
well,
know?
I will give you that. That's shocking. They actually followed up with the Democrat with a hard question. That's pretty amazing.
You know what? He only had two. So I was listening to Fox Business this morning, and Varney had on a good guy that did an analysis, and it was like Vance got 7 tough questions, and Walls got 2. And so they did this analysis. I thought that was
Mhm.
pretty interesting because I didn't look at any of that look in that aspect at all. And
Mhm.
then I saw a statistics that somewhere somebody had a
Mhm.
undecided group of voters that watched the debate,
Mhm.
and the majority of those that were undecided absolutely thought Vance won the debate, and he
Mhm.
won them over to his side because I think because he was articulate. He showed he was, in the very first question, he introduced himself.
Mhm.
And it was about the fourth or fifth question that
Mhm.
actually Walls followed suit. He
Yeah.
introduced, kind of told a little about himself.
Mhm.
But then he actually didn't answer the question that was asked,
Right.
where JD Vance says, and to get back to your point of the
Mhm.
question, then he
Mhm.
answers the question. The
Mhm.
guy is he's certainly
And see,
sharp.
that I think is one of the biggest differences is people have gotten tired of the dodgy politician who won't answer the question. You ask Kamala a question and she gives you a whole soliloquy about she grew up in the middle class. Like, what in the heck does that have to do with the question? And this guy Vols does the same thing. He
Yeah.
answered, and people appreciate the lack of dodginess. How about you just answer the question? And
Yeah.
and I think and by doing that, that puts you ahead all by itself. Um,
Yeah, I think there's a whole lot of people in America that are tired of the lying politicians, and not, we want to hear your policies. We want to hear what you stand for. We want you to answer the questions. And if you don't have that, I'll tell you, I won't give you the time of day.
yeah.
And that's where I'm at. I Last night I couldn't watch it live, so I watched. We recorded it because I
Mhm.
had a meeting, and interestingly, we had a candidate come to our central committee meeting who was not on my radar, running for a non-partisan position, and I'm not going to say who it was or anything because I don't want any repercussions. But I will tell you, he was very candid. He answered questions because I said, "Well, wait a minute, wait, thank you." I
Mhm.
gave him just a few minutes because it was like a last minute, yes, come speak because the election's soon, and we weren't having another meeting
Mhm.
before the election. And I said, "Wait a minute, people might want to ask you a question." He goes,
Mhm.
"Oh, okay," you
Yeah.
know. And so there was a few questions, and he was frankly just candid. He
Mhm.
says, "This is who I am. This is
Mhm.
why I'm running. And I'm asking for your vote." And it's like, oh, yeah, there we go. It wasn't double speak. There
Mhm.
wasn't, some hidden message there.
Yeah.
And
People
doing a little
appreciate.
research on his opponent, I went, oh, yeah, this is an easy decision.
So I tell you, one of the things I learned a long time ago. I used to think. I remember when I was in college, and I thought I was a dummy because I couldn't understand these long, flowery words that people were using. And then it gradually dawned on me that it's the fault of the sender of the message, not the receiver, if you don't get it. And
Yeah.
if they're doing that, then they're probably trying to obfuscate something and sound smart rather than just keeping to the simple words necessary to communicate the message. And when you listen to these politicians, the worst ones do that all the time. And then one thing I wanted to add to this discussion, I think is so interesting. You look at the topics that the Democrats have tried to sell as important. I heard a podcaster speak to this, and it was kind of a regular guy, kind of a podcaster, a little rough around the edges, but this is the general population. He said they're trying to sell insurrection like that's like an issue. And what he basically said, well, insurrection ain't paying the bills. Insurrection is not paying for the groceries. Insurrection is not buying the gas. Insurrection is not paying for the insurance. Insurrection is not making the rent. We just don't care about that. Now, it didn't matter the the truthfulness or untruthfulness of the issue itself, which we of course know is just nonsense. But he was saying it's unimportant. Um, and it's funny; those they seem to be trying to sell that and abortion. And he said the same thing about that issue. No matter how we might feel about abortion, that's not what they're focused on. I'm trying to pay the bills. And if you're not speaking to that, and if you're not speaking to illegal immigration or crime, then you're not selling what they need to, what they want to buy. And I think that's the strength that we have.
Yeah, and and I think that's where they're trying to make abortion be all about the election. And I hope it isn't, because for me, it's not about abortion. It is about saving America, saving our economy, saving our country, because this could very well be our last election if Trump doesn't win, because they're already now talking about, let's undo the Constitution.
That's clearly the goal. I mean,
It
everything they're
is.
doing is designed to do that. And
Yeah,
if there ever was a way to destroy a country, it's to flood it with a bunch of illegals who don't share the same value systems, don't know the culture. Um,
absolutely.
and that's what they're looking to do. At one level, it's buying the votes, and that used to be the objective. I think it's far beyond that now. I think it's destroy the fabric that holds us together. Um, and you think about like in Springfield, Ohio, is a great example of where they want to take the whole country. And it's so simple to fix. Them to sit there and say that uh, what they want to do about illegal immigration now, what a blatant lie. You could do something about it today. She's the vice president right now. And by the way, and this is
Yes.
another thing, we seem to have forgotten that the president is not either one of these people running. And where the heck is he? Um, it's the country's effectively being run by no one that we know of.
You're absolutely right. And that's the biggest damn problem, because we
Oh,
have a shadow government,
yeah.
and you
Why
could,
doesn't she? Why doesn't she invoke the 25th Amendment right now? She could be president right now.
well, be careful. That might be what the October surprise is.
Well,
You
we don't
know,
know what it is.
now, because today, Biden went to the Carolinas, and she went to Georgia. She says we're going to give out $750. Biden doesn't say how much we're going to give out. She does. So they're putting her in that presidential position. And it wouldn't surprise me if they didn't do that, um, to make her president before the election.
But I think that hurts them. I think one of the reasons why they haven't tied her, they're trying to distance her record from his by not having her play that. So she pretends like she's not the vice president or she's
Yes.
not part of this administration. So I don't know if that helps them. Like, that doesn't mean they're not doing it, by the way.
Right. Oh,
Um,
yeah, for sure.
but I'm just not sure. The more she's seen as a part of him, the worse it is for them. So I'm not sure what their strategy is, short of some massive disaster that happens at the last minute that keeps people away from the polls.
Well,
Like,
this disaster that just happened
no,
is massive.
it's
And
pretty interesting.
it's hitting where there's a lot of conservative voters. It is massive. And it's a damn shame that the National Guard was not immediately put in, and the helicopters to help start rescuing people, not
Yeah.
just bringing aid in. I've watched some videos today that were pretty horrifying, of
Mhm.
people trying to go and do rescues, and actually the local government's telling them, if you don't leave here, we're going to arrest you. They've got helicopters, private citizens flying their helicopters that have experience in search and rescue and extraction,
Mhm.
and the local government saying, get out of here.
Kind of like Hawaii, eh?
Kind of like Hawaii,
But if
kind
those
of like
girls,
Lahaina over in Maui. And it's awful. But now today, oh, here to the rescue, we're going to give you 1,000 people.
Mhm.
That's a drop in the bucket. But I hope they're bringing in, because supplies are one thing, but you have to have helicopters. This
Mhm.
is, people are underwater, and the death toll, I think, is a drop in the bucket of what they're telling us.
Yeah, no, I'm going to guess that's probably true. It's unbelievable. And it doesn't seem to get the play, again, like the Ohio disaster. I mean, you think about the kind of play this would have gotten in the media 30 or 40 years ago. Think about 3 Mile Island,
Oh
for
yeah.
example, which didn't have near the death toll of either of these things we're talking about.
No.
And we still talk about 3 Mile Island. And now Ohio, Springfield, like I can't remember the name of the town in Ohio that had the disaster. It's like forgotten about. I can't even remember the name of the town. It's
Is
terrible.
that you talking about the train derailment?
Right.
Yeah, Palestine.
Palestine. Right.
Yeah.
How can that be so far in the rearview mirror?
Exactly. They still haven't gotten help over there. It's so sorry,
Yeah.
too bad.
See, that
So
needs
sorry,
to
too
be
bad.
that needs to be talked about more.
It does.
Yeah, it really does. Can you imagine being in those communities that have been destroyed that way and it's like forgotten about?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's our national media is a disgrace, an absolute disgrace.
Yes, it
But
is, because it just shows how much it's a propaganda machine. Where if you look on X, and X is the #1 app because that's where you're going to find the truth.
yeah,
And captive audience, we're on X as well.
yeah,
But that's where you're going to find the truth and see what's going on, and be getting more of a broader view. Now, I do have a little bit of good news, if I could get it straight. It was Norway. Norway is doing a big turnaround in immigration, and they are going to be exporting their illegals, going, we're done.
that's
People
awesome.
that don't, why should we have people that don't want to assimilate and live here? I think
Yeah.
the Muslim brothers ought to be helping the Muslim brothers, and they can go back to where they're from. And quite frankly, you
Mhm.
know what? This was all by design. And so they're looking at doing that, and other nations are looking at doing the very same thing. There have been a lot of strikes that hasn't been shown in the mainstream media, and there's a lot of fighting going on in many parts of the world, not just in Israel,
Oh
not just
no.
with Iran bombing Israel.
Mhm.
That's a whole nother topic there, Don.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. What's not being reported? You look at in pretty much every Western country, there is a huge uprising amongst the working class to the conservative side around this and driven by this immigration issue. Whether you're talking, I think her name is Marie Le Pen in
Yes.
France, uh,
Yes.
the Italian prime minister, Holland, and we saw the whole thing there with the farmers and what they're trying to do to them there. Norway, you just mentioned. You go up and down the list. South America, we got several countries in the same bucket there. So all over the Western world, this uprising is happening against and it's the leadership class. Great Britain, you look what's happening in London. I mean, the place is on the brink of like civil war. They're far worse than we are in London. Australia, same kind of a thing. Canada, it's like the country's leadership is destroying the country largely over this issue.
Yeah.
So we're not alone, but
No, we're not.
we're the most important domino on the board, right? If this is a chessboard, we're the queen. If the queen goes down, the likelihood that you're going to win the game is pretty slim. I mean, Great Britain is certainly a rook. France is certainly a rook. Italy's a knight, right? You can lose one or two of those, but you start losing the queen and it's over. Um, that's
Yeah.
where we
We are the bastion of freedom in our country. And, and I read some headline that said, well, America thinks they're the only ones that have the right to freedom of speech. Oh, no, everybody has that right, except we have it in writing in our Constitution
yes,
and our Bill of Rights.
that's
We
exactly
have
right.
it in writing for our nation. Everybody has
Uh,
the right of conscious belief,
hmm
right?
hmm
And freedom of speech. And I'm very happy to say that right before coming on Captive Audience, that I read the courts have halted Gavin Newsom's attack on the freedom of speech.
That's awesome. See, there's
The
wins.
a judge says, nope, that's we're stopping that right now,
Hmm
and that's a good thing. The next thing the courts need to do is stop this, that you cannot challenge anything with election, and you can't challenge, that somebody needs to have an ID, because that was the other
hmm
unconstitutional executive order that Gavin Newsom signed that the
Mhm.
another judge needs to say, no, 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 that's not going to stand.
And their marketing is very clever. I was sitting with watching TV with my mom the other day, and if you're in the Portland, Oregon area, you're hearing the constant left wing marketing all the time. Even when it's not advertising, it's left wing advertising. So it's a regular news station reporting how the administration was trying to pass this law that you had to have voter ID to vote, but they weren't saying it that way. They were saying in order to suppress voter, people's ability to vote, kind of a thing. And so my mom, being the innocent person, like kind of made the comment that that's like a negative thing. And I had to like step in. That's again, this goes back to what we talked about earlier. I had to step in and correct her. No, what that means is they have to be legal. What do you call it? They have to be citizens to vote. Just like you've always done your whole life. You used to go to the polling station with a driver's license. That's all we're asking these people to do. You know,
Right. And, and here in Oregon, DMV accidentally or otherwise, I don't have any idea. They made it that over 2,000, I don't remember the number now, people could vote. And of those, now this was a glitch at DMV is what's come out. And of those, 9 people, maybe it was 1,200, 1,300 people, were able to be deemed citizens and can vote, but it was a DMV glitch. And of those, 9 actually voted, and now it's being investigated if they will be charged or not. Because so I don't know how DMV determined these people that this glitch happened. But, when you sign a voter registration form, you are affirming that you are a citizen of the United States.
mhm.
And that's a felony. If you sign that and you are not, and you vote, that is a felony. And I know when Dennis Richardson was Secretary of State, there were just a few people that they investigated. I want to say 3 or 5
Mhm.
that voted that they could not determine. And I don't recall the outcome of that, because it is a felony in the state of Oregon. Now, with our attorney general currently, would they be prosecuted? I don't know. But boy,
Mhm.
if we get Will Lathrop in, I just about
Yep.
guarantee you it would.
And that's why we need people, elected officials who believe in the rule of law and not the
Yes,
rule of what I want the law to be, because the law is only as effective as your willingness to actually enforce it. And that's
true.
where Oregon and Portland in particular, Oregon in general, have fallen down. You don't need any new laws. You need to enforce the laws that we have. And that means getting people who have integrity, in office. One thing I did want to mention, Sonny, because we're winding down here, and that's this article I found on the UK Guardian ran. This is the United Kingdom, about the U.S. Healthcare system ranking last amongst peer countries. And what was interesting about the article was that you'd initially think about just the healthcare system in general, but I thought the key findings once you dug into this paper was that out of the 4.8 billion prescriptions that are filled in the United States, how many prescriptions are being taken by every man, woman, and child in the United States. If you average that out, it works out to 15 prescriptions for every single person in the country. I mean, that's like insane. And then when you drill down beneath that, they estimate that the average American over 80, so that's what you might call an elderly person, is averaging 22 prescriptions a person. Now, you got to stop and think about this for a minute. When,
My
when
jaw, I got to pick my jaw up off the floor. What?
there's no way that that can be an ethical thing to do, walking around with 23 prescriptions, because when they study these drugs, they study them in the environment of just the one drug. So we don't know. We know what that drug does by itself in your body. We don't know what it does when there's 22 other drugs in your body interacting with it. So all what this tells you is the massively successful job that the pharmaceutical companies have done in terms of selling these things
Mhm.
to both us as patients and to physicians in general. Every time you turn on your TV, if you're ever at home for daytime TV, get ready, because you're going to see a slew. I bet 50 to 60% of the commercials are drug for pretty much everything under the sun.
Yeah.
And nobody's talking about diet, exercise. what you might do in order to, have some control over it. It's like one drug sales pitch after the other. And what is that costing the system? Um, I'm,
Right.
I'm sure there's some huge percentage of people who die from these drug interactions. I used to know the stats on that, but there's got to be some huge number that die just from that.
Well, I would think so. I've my husband has been on more than like about five at once. And I remember a conversation with our doctor, and my husband says, so what about the interaction with that? And their doctor said, if it's more than three, we don't know how they're going to interact. More than three. So imagine 13. Well, I can tell you, my husband could tell you a story that a good friend of his passed away, and when the paramedics came to have to the home for this medical emergency, and they looked at all the drugs, they told his spouse, "Well, see that pile of drugs? That's what killed him."
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
that's
Mhm.
and that's what the paramedics said. That's a hard
Yeah.
one to swallow
No,
because
it
we
is.
trust our doctors,
Mhm.
but you have to, as patients, have to be advocates for our health. And I think we have to look at going, well, what are the odds? Why are you prescribing this? And what are the odds if I don't take it, of how this is going to help me? What's it really going to do? And what happens if I don't? Because, I listened to the doctor tell my husband, you should be on this XYZ drug. And so my husband asked some questions and I asked some questions, and after listening to it, he says, no, I think I'll take my chances. No, thank you, I'm not going to take that one. You don't need to write me the prescription, because being on it, taking it, has a risk, and not taking something has a risk. There's risks on both sides,
And
and
that
some
part they
things.
never tell you.
Right. But it's common sense. There's risks on both sides. And sometimes I'm not anti-drug, because certainly there's times when you absolutely need something.
Sure.
But I feel so much with the that sometimes they're just pushing it on you. Let's get you on this. I've been told to take a drug, and I go, what for?
Yeah. Well, we're
I
being
there's
yeah,
My blood works fine. Well, your age and blood. And I go, nah, no
yeah,
thanks.
we're being over prescribed. That's what it is. I mean,
It
you take a
is.
look at, for example, there's this term called relative risk. So let's say, for example, that I'll use myself. So a black man over 60 years old has a risk of, I don't know, let's say a heart attack of whatever that percentage is. So let's say it's like 1%, right?
Mhm.
And oh, you need to be on this additional drug because reduce your risk by 10%. Well, I'm already at 1%. So it's going to be,
Right.
so now it's 0.9%. And is that worth an extra $40 a month? I mean, I'm just right. And maybe it is, but most of the time you start looking at things like relative risks. And these are questions that the most patients are going to think to ask. Yeah, it's going to reduce my risk by 10%. What's my risk now? Oh, it's 0.01%. Well, I don't care.
Right. Right. No,
And
I
that's
think I'm good.
right. Yeah, it's like, because all they do is they do what they're told. I mean,
Yes.
it's sad to
Yes.
say, but most doctors just they do what they're told. They are
Yeah.
highly educated drug dealers. That's what they are.
They are. And the doctors of old weren't like that. But today they absolutely are. I think pharmaceutical is probably their biggest course to take.
Mhm.
you know?
Well, that's all they do. Well, they don't learn nutrition. They don't learn exercise physiology. They
No.
don't learn what do you call it? Alternative stuff, chiropractic or what do you call it? The Eastern medicine. They don't learn any of that stuff. So they learn how to write prescriptions for the drug companies, which makes the drug companies money.
Yes,
That's
and now you're of this age and of this, whatever. And so by gosh, you ought to start getting on something.
mhm.
And I think, no, I'm a person I've always been a person that asks questions.
Yeah.
Always. It drives my husband crazy, but he's learned to live with it. and learned to deal with it. And he now realizes I'm not attacking him when I ask. And so the doctor, it's the same
Mhm.
way. They say, you ought to have this shot. And I say, what's the efficacy?
Yeah.
I always ask that. That's like the first words out of my mouth. What's the efficacy of that shot?
Yeah.
And
What's the
why do
side
I
effect?
need it?
Right. Well, and you just maybe me think of another issue too. What percentage of the population has been vaxxed? We know probably around 75% of the population has been vaxxed at least once. We have no idea how these drugs interact in a body that has been vaxxed. So
Right.
you layer that on top of that. Um,
Yeah, because the vaxes of old are not like the vaxes of today. And,
no,
the shots of today. I mean, a lot of things have changed. And we have a responsibility. I don't believe that we can just finally blindly follow along with a lawyer or a doctor. You have to ask questions, you have to educate yourself, and we have to do our own research. There
right.
was a time that a friend of mine was on some drugs and said,
Mhm,
gosh, I'm feeling like this, I'm feeling like that. And so I did a little bit of research into the drugs, and I go, well, three of those things cause what you're feeling. Three
mhm.
of them have
Yeah.
that side effect. So it's no wonder, and so
Right.
they,
I think I really do believe that a lot of people take a bunch of drugs that they think they come to the conclusion that as part of the aging process, they don't feel as good as they used to. When the reality is, it's the drugs that they're on that are causing it. And I've seen that several times where coming from the industry, I've talked to people that told me the side effects and asked them what drugs they had. And this is simply by reading the package insert. It's like, I'm not a doctor, so talk to your doctor. But I
right?
would suggest you either switch this drug or reduce that one, and we circled the package insert and highlighted it, and here's why. And people came back thrilled. Oh man, I feel great now.
Yeah.
So you've been walking around feeling like hell for 10 years because of the drug, not because you're older.
Yeah, absolutely. And so that's you have to do we need to be our advocates and do research and ask questions, and don't be afraid. And I'll tell you, I'm not a doctor either, but if the doctor is offended by the questions, I would find another doctor,
That's exactly right. It's time to
you
move
know.
on because you're
Yeah.
the one that's gonna live in this body, not them.
Exactly. It's going to affect your health,
Hmm.
and it's going to cost you money, and being as a person who lived on a sailboat, I
Hmm.
gave up a lot of security for that freedom. And
Sure.
so today I still live like that, going, life is going to happen, and I
Hmm.
need to take care of me as best I can, and
Hmm.
putting drugs in as little as possible,
Hmm.
I think, is a good thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Because the purpose of the drug creates a side effect. That's what they do. You know, its main effect is a side effect. So if you can possibly, and again, like we said earlier, there are places for them. But if you could change that by something you're changing in maybe your environment, maybe the stress in your life, maybe the food that you eat, maybe the exercise that you're getting. I mean, there's a whole bunch of those levers that need to be pulled first, and most of us don't pull them because we become so used to immediate gratification. I take a pill and it fixes it. Well, it
Yeah.
doesn't really fix it. It hides something, is what it does. Um,
You hit the nail on the head, because there's no magic pill.
no.
We're never going to feel as young as we used to.
Hmm.
Mentally, we might feel like that, but our bodies aren't. And there is no magic pill. I would like to address something that Pat Finley said, is I'm learning that osteoporosis drugs only prevent old bone from being shed. I'm going to tell you, I know somebody firsthand that has taken one of these drugs that has now, their bones are altered forever, and not in a good way. And through several doctors, was on this drug for 20 years. And so, but come to find out, she went to an endocrinologist, and the
Hmm.
endocrinologist said, get the hell off of this stuff. All you got to do is take, vitamin D and D3 and calcium, but it was in copious amounts. And
Hmm.
she followed what the endocrinologist said, that's looking at your body at the cellular level,
Hmm.
and found out that she wasn't absorbing calcium correctly. Her body wasn't. So that's why the osteoporosis. So she did a lot of reversal, but the endocrinologist is who helped her. So, I'll tell you, you got to do research, as to
Research.
causation. And I wouldn't take one of those. I'm not a doctor, and I'm not going to play one on TV, but, it's, yeah. And magnesium, you're right. So it pays to look around. They
So yeah,
have lawsuits on that stuff. One of them was called Fosamax or something.
yeah,
They
yeah,
have lawsuits on that, class action suits on some of those, and there's a reason why.
yeah. Well, see, and the thing you have to remember is this: things like vitamin D, ivermectin, uh,
Yeah,
magnesium. These things cost like pennies. That's why they're not trying to push them on you.
yeah,
They're not making any money on them. Uh,
exactly, exactly.
you have to always know the incentives behind the person that you're talking to, and
Yeah,
sadly enough, that's there's the lack of ethics at the top of the food chain has obviously impacted the medical establishment as well. So it just pays to educate yourself and not immediately trust what they tell you.
yeah, absolutely. Sometimes it's like going to an endocrinologist to have a
Yep,
look. How come?
absolutely.
How's my am I balanced? Is
Hmm.
everything balanced in me, and what
Right.
can I do to make it better?
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, my dear,
Okay, well, this is we're ending on a medical deal here.
we are. How did
Pharmaceutical.
we wound up on back to drugs?
Yeah, there we go.
Well,
But
Nancy
it
Reagan.
wasn't fentanyl.
That's right. Well, Nancy Reagan said, "Just say no," and that's what we're saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, hey, well, as always, Sunny and our fantastic audience, I have thoroughly enjoyed this time together. I hope you got as much out of it as I did, and hope you have the rest of a wonderful Wednesday evening. And Sunny, any closing thoughts?
Register to vote. Do your research on politics and your medication. And you know what? Think outside the box a little bit. We have to take. We can't just follow blindly things. We have to be responsible for ourselves, and that's not a bad thing. So support the candidates if you can. Right now we're in the push, and we need to do everything we can to help Will Lathrop and the other candidates get elected. So I'll be talking more about that Friday. I'll see you Friday. We'll be talking politics.
All right, you all take care. Keep fighting.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Oops. What did I do here, Sonny? Oh, there it is. Got that. Let's see.